All right, so today we're putting the spotlight on festive sales, ladies and gentlemen. This year's sale could lead to a turf battle for quick commerce and e-commerce players, and expansion into quick commerce by established players and newer rivals. That continues. So a fierce price war is unfolding in the quick commerce space that's ahead of the peak festive season, with platforms offering discounts of up to 30%. In fact, that really points higher than last year's across daily essentials like staples and personal care products. In fact, products are being aggressively promoted by not just Blinkit, Zepto and Swiggy Instamart, but newer rivals as well. And that includes Flipkart Minutes, PB Now, JioMart and Amazon Now. Industry executives say that companies are ramping up inventory and they're buying for top ad placements to secure visibility in this crowded market. In fact, speaking about India's e-commerce market last year, platforms last year clocked an estimated of $14 billion as far as gross merchandise value during the festive period is concerned. That was buoyed by online shopping demand across the country, especially in smaller towns. But the big question is, will this year see a wider traction by quick commerce players, even as more and more entrants are getting into the ecosystem? And of course, there is expansion on dark store front. And is this going to be an inflection point for e-commerce as a sector? Well, to discuss some of those points, I'm now joined by Kushal Bhatnagar, Associate Partner, Redseer. Thank you very much, Kushal, for taking the time out and speaking to us here on ET Now.
Thank you so much for having me.
Kushal, last year, Redseer projected festive season GMV to have crossed $14 billion. How much are you projecting this year as far as the festive season is concerned?
So we are projecting close to a 20 to 25% growth in e-commerce GMV this year. And compared to last year, the year-on-year growth was actually around 11%. So we are projecting almost double growth this time around on e-commerce GMV at an overall level.
So when you say double the growth, can you give us a number? You've spoken in percentage terms, but what is that number that you're essentially putting out as far as your projections this year for the festive season go?
Yes, I think it will be, we have that in 1,000 crores. That's how we kind of measure it. So it's expected to be more than 115,000 crores this year. I think it was somewhere close to 95,000 crores last year or so. And this we are talking about a 30 to 35-day festive period leading up to Diwali. So that's how we count the festive period on a year-on-year, like-to-like basis.
Well, that's a staggering growth, Kushal, from around 90,000 crores to now 1,15,000 crores in the 30 to 35-day period. That's going to be humongous. But you also mentioned in your report last year that Tier 2 cities led festive growth and the spending was up by 13%. How much has that changed? For instance, if you just see the sales that have been clocked on Rakhi and Independence Day, how much are you factoring in so far as Tier 2 and 3 city sales are concerned?
See, so it's a fairly balanced narrative this time around. I think because on one end you have the quick commerce platforms which cater largely to the bigger cities, and they are of course seeing a very strong BAU growth momentum even pre-festive, which is likely to go into the festive period as well. So that segment will actually benefit the larger city growth, and at the same time you also have value commerce and general e-commerce players who are catering a lot more to the smaller cities. And I think at this time around, due to multiple macro and micro factors, they'll also be pushing forward products at a more affordable price range for the smaller cities itself. So we expect a lot more balanced growth rate this time around between larger cities and smaller cities, because now you have a sizable channel, sizable and fast growing channel, which is catering to the metro cities itself, and also a balanced channel that's out there for the smaller cities.
Right, Kushal, but reports also suggest that quick commerce as a platform is expected to cross e-commerce so far as these sales are concerned, given the kind of traction that this segment has particularly received. In metros, players have also extended their operations in over 100 cities. So high expectations riding on that. How do you really see the split between quick commerce and e-commerce this year?
So, see, I think, of course, if you just look at the growth rates, quick commerce has been growing at north of 150% year on year this year so far. And that momentum is likely to continue in the festive period as well. So that's definitely expected, and it will be much faster than what e-commerce rest of the e-commerce will be. But at the same time, I think in terms of scale, quick commerce is let's say just around 10% of overall e-commerce market. 10 and at least in the festive period, that's what we expect the proportion to stay, right? So I think in terms of scale, it's still small. You still have a large portion of categories such as appliances, mobiles, fashion, which are, let's say, not so much purchased on quick commerce and are more e-commerce first and will remain so going into the festive, right? So while the growth rates will be in favor of quick commerce the way they have been, at the same time, in terms of scale, we still think that it will stay around, let's say, 10% of overall e-commerce market, and the rest of the market also has potential to grow at a decent pace.
Right. In fact, let's also talk about GST rate rationalization bonanza, which the Prime Minister announced on Independence Day. But analysts say that it is expected to push people to hold on to demand now. And of course, perhaps that will be unleashed during the Diwali period. Is that something that you're also picking up, especially as far as e-commerce as a platform is concerned?
Yes, I think that's of course an interesting trend that I think we are now tracking and also looking at how it will impact the overall festive bit. So see, I think at an overall level, it has a positive impact on the festive outlook, given consumers will now be looking at a much lower prices, given the GST simplification will happen and the rates will be slashed. However, there is still uncertainty about when this will happen. So there is, of course, that commitment of Diwali. I think there are multiple articles floating around that it can happen earlier as well. So that's still uncertain. And in an uncertain scenario, what can happen is that consumers may just delay or hold off some of their spending and just wait for the rates to come down, right? So I think that can still happen. Having said that, there can be short-term hold-offs because of the GST bit, but in the long term, if you just talk about the full year, this year, I think it should be a positive impact on the overall consumption and festive consumption in general. So it's a positive move as much as the festive bit is concerned. Of course, the short-term sale that we are about to witness in September could be slightly impacted based on delayed spending, at least in large ticket categories. But overall, a positive move is what I would say.
Right. So there could be a delay as far as festive spending is concerned, but the number of 1,15,000 crores over this 30-day festive period, that remains intact. But, Kushal, when we talk about pricing for quick commerce and e-commerce platforms, how much of a fall in prices are you anticipating, at least for the next 1 month? Because, like you stated, the demand is expected to get pushed to, the Diwali season, closer to the Diwali season. So are you anticipating perhaps a fall in prices by sellers to sort of, offset the inventory at this point in time?
See, so there are multiple factors at play here. Of course, I think the demand could get delayed up to the Diwali season, but then I think every sale period actually has certain, strengths and certain things that they're known for. If we just take it at a category level, then I think the delayed spending will mostly happen, let's say, large ticket categories such as appliances. That's where consumers may hold off on spending because these are not categories or products where you have a lot of urgent need that's there. I think consumers may be okay to delay their spending in those cases. But at the same time, when you're talking about, let's say, category like fashion, one, the ticket size is low. And secondly, I think there's a lot of impulse need, wedding season needs, urgent needs that consumers have, which may just cause them to stick to the pricing that's out there in the upcoming festive period, right? So there's a category play here which needs to be considered when we just talk about, let's say, upcoming as versus the year end and festive period. Secondly, the same time, the e-commerce sale is particularly known a lot for mobile purchase. So consumers have actually been typically waiting for this sale to come on board, and then they keep an amount aside, and that's where they do that spending. So a lot of pent up demand actually plays into the mobiles purchase during the sale period, and which is likely to stay. So there we may not have the delayed spending that may happen, right? So one, the delayed spending will be there, but it will be there in certain categories, and the other ones will continue with the festive momentum that's typically out there. So that's one point. Secondly, I think we believe that the sellers and brands, along with platforms, they have definitely slotted in decent or decent amount of discounts for the upcoming festive periods, particularly because the macros are on their side. And there are multiple indicators to validate that. I think the increasing rural wages, the income tax slab rationalization, which improved consumption to some degree, even some other categories such as appliances have had a let's say subdued summer cycle. So brands will be looking to push through their inventory in the festive period as well. So due to multiple factors, the discounts are likely to be at a decent level and which will boost the festive spending.
Right. In fact, that's an important point that you made. But let's also talk about the tariffs front. Even though India is looking at diversifying to other markets, at least 50 markets have been identified by the Ministry of Commerce and Industry to sort of cushion the impact. But what are you picking up so far as these e-commerce platforms are concerned, given that some of these platforms are also delivering in the United States as a market? Is the impact of tariffs going to be significant on these platforms?
So it will not be significant to be honest, because the overseas business on these platforms is especially in e-commerce when you talk about. I'm not talking about brands, but the e-commerce platforms per se. That's fairly minimal, right? So any kind of tariff impact will stay limited at least when the upcoming festive season is concerned, because they are significantly domestic demand heavy. So they should perform agnostic of whatever happens on the tariff side for the most part.
Right, but is domestic demand enough to cushion the impact? Is that what you're essentially suggesting?
So one, the impact itself is low, at least for e-commerce as a category, because I think majority, I'm pretty sure more than 90% business still comes from the domestic demand itself. And secondly, I think it's a country of 1.4 billion plus population, a huge PFCE consumption basket, which has potential to go further. So when we just speak about that, I'm pretty sure the headroom for them to grow in India is significant out there, not just for the festive period, but even for, let's say, the future, right? So there's significant potential just in India for e-commerce players to expand further. To give you an example, I think we have close to 250 million odd online shoppers in India, in a country of, let's say, almost 1 billion adult population, right? So just the e-commerce shopper base has potential to expand to almost 4x of what it is now, right? So there's definitely enough demand and definitely a lot of hedging against overseas businesses out there. So limited impact is what I would say.
A limited impact is essentially what you're factoring in so far as these tariffs or the whammy of now elevated tariffs of up to 50% is concerned. But Kushal, one final question before we let you go, just on the overall growth of e-commerce versus quick commerce. I brought about this point about the fact that there are additional companies that are now getting into this arena of quick commerce. Flipkart Minutes, of course, Amazon is also there. Big Basket, BB Now, which is completely like an app that's dominated by the 10-minute delivery model. What exactly are you anticipating and estimating for e-commerce as a platform? Will growth be limited on these specific festival days or event-led days? Because, for general utilities, for everyday utilities, people are preferring the quick commerce route.
Yeah, so I think I would say that there is space for multiple models to exist in the India e-commerce market. It will not be just one model winning the entire market going ahead. I don't think that will be the case. Different models will win in different pockets is how we see the market going ahead. And if I just talk about the India e-commerce market today, you can just let's say divide the models very simply into four parts already, and there is another segment which I won't even go into, right? So there are of course these legacy e-commerce platforms such as Amazon and Flipkart will still drive bulk of the GMV. You have quick commerce platforms, you have verticals like Nykaa and Myntra which specialize in particular categories, and you also have platforms such as Meesho and Shopsy which are more value commerce, and they also have been growing at north of 30% year on year this year. And the last segment I spoke about caters very uniquely to the most deepest of the pockets that are there in India, right? So the different place for each of these models to exist. Of course, we talk about quick commerce a lot because it has grown at a explosive place in the last couple of years or so and still continues to do that. But I think it also has its own strength areas, such as, let's say, when I talk about categories, it's a lot more focused on FMCG, fresh, beauty and personal care, electronic accessories. Similarly, certain other models are a lot more stronger when you want to have a very wide selection where consumers want to explore different trends, different patterns, different colors, different sizes, such as fashion. And there you need a more broader model, such as what verticals do or what value commerce players do, right? A quick commerce platform has limited play in how a fashion category can be actually targeted in India. It has multiple nuances to it, right? So, of course, it will continue to play and grow in certain spaces, whereas other models will continue to do that in other spaces as well. That's how we think the market will evolve from going from here on.
All right, Kushal. So essentially what you're suggesting is an omni-channel approach will be followed, but how does the percentage and the mix really shift over the next couple of months and years will be something that will be interesting to watch out for, and that's something that we will be tracking. On that note, thank you very much for taking the time out and speaking to us here on Startup Central.